Hi, and welcome to the TechHeart Book Hating Club, a book and comic review podcast. This might end up being the first episode. I didn't intend it to be, but, I ended up filming this before I filmed Pizza Tree, which I intended to be my first episode, so this is probably gonna end up going up first. Now I'm gonna give you a bit of an overview as to what I thought about, Moonshine, Volume 1. Not good. It's not good. This is one of the most boring, this is actually the most boring comic I've ever read. I brought it to read on an airplane. It was the only thing I brought to read. I got about 3 pages in. Not 3 pages. I waited till probably the 10th or 12th page, around there. And then I just stopped reading it. I put it back and I did, just nothing, basically, for the rest of the 2.5-hour flight. And, I'm gonna read out these, reviews on the back cover that they featured, because I think they do a good job framing exactly what I hate about it. The first review is as darkly beautiful and engrossing as you'd expect from Azzarello and Risso, with a kick, it's a bad font, as strong as the best corn liqueur. And then it's from Jason Aaron, author of Southern Bastards and the Goddamn. Never heard of the Goddamn, thought about reading Southern Bastards, definitely won't now because you have a bad taste in comics. It's definitely not engrossing, and sorry, I've got a stutter. Art style is definitely not beautiful. Although the use of colors was great. Whiskey and Werewolves, killer period drama from one. Hold on a minute. Killer period drama? That must have been a bad time. From one of the best writers, artist duos ever assembled. That is by Brian K. Vaughan, author of Saga and Paper Girls. Never heard of either of those. I'm assuming they're both comics. There's a haunting, moody vibe that makes Moonshine as alluring as it is foreboding. Azzarello and Risso have another winner on their hands, and that is by IGN. I already had no respect for IGN. This comic is, the textbook definition of a bad example of tone. The last review is Azzarello and Risso, Go for the Juggler, get it because it's about werewolves, with this bloody tale of bootleggers, gangsters, and monsters, both human and inhuman. That's pushing it. These characters don't have enough personality to be called monsters. None of them do. The character with the most personality is the mob boss that you never really see. And that review is by Cliff Chang, one of the writers for Paper Girls and Wonder Woman. Again, never heard of Paper Girls, assuming it's a comic. And I don't read superhero comics, never really got into them, so I never planned on reading Wonder Woman, so nothing lost there, I guess. Just, ooh. Oh, I'm sorry, there's one last review on the front cover that says Damn Near Perfect by Nerdist. I don't know what perfect is, but whatever you're into, Nerdist, I guess. And on the front cover, is a picture of just like a woman drenched in blood with a knife and curly hair. And I'd like to say that, it's misleading, because the main character is not this woman, it's some random white dude. And that woman at no point, is drenched in blood or holding a knife. In fact, I don't even think she's evil, which I was really disappointed in. I thought our main protagonist was going to be this girl, and she was just going to be like messing stuff up, and I was looking forward to it. But I guess not. That's too high the standard. Next, as I go into it, contrary to the name of this podcast, I don't just hate on books and comics. I'm just kind of a stiff critic, which is why I named it that. And also, people just have like a tendency to read and watch negative reviews for some reason, so it's buzzwords. But like, let me tell you something that I did really love about this comic. It's not a good comic, but one thing I did love was the color. Now, as I said earlier, this comic is terrible at setting up tone, but the color does like all of it. What is done purely through the colors. Like when you first start out the comic, you're in a woods, and they have kind of like this unsettling, what I'm guessing is kind of a blue-green color. I can't see greens that well. It looks blue to me, but I'm pretty sure there's green in there. And mostly because there's yellow in the middle of the blue. And so like you have this blue to yellow tint, yellow to highlight stuff. And this kind of sets up an unsettling vibe, which nothing else in the comic does, because this is an action scene, or at least like it's a thriller, I guess, so I don't know if action scene's correct, but it flows terribly. It's written poorly. but the colors are great, so thank you for that. And I'd also like to say, I actually like how the comic is framed, so to speak. And when I say that, I mean like where the panels show up, the weight of the lines on the panel, and almost every page has at least one panel that isn't framed. And what I really love is when it has multiple panels that aren't framed, but they flow into each other in a way that looks nice. The best example I can think of this is like there's some kids wandering through a what appears to be a swamp, but I don't think there are any swamps in West Virginia. I don't know, I've never been to West Virginia. I'm from Georgia, we have swamps here. And there's like just a frame where there's a boy chasing a turtle. And basically it looks like one panel, but the characters are drawn multiple times, but it still gets across as this boy moving through the jungle, and I thought that was really nice. So, the colors, the framing, great. Next, I am going to talk about the characters, and tell you just how much these characters are terrible. I only know 2 of their names, not counting Fat and Little Tony, which aren't needed. But let's start with the characters we start with that die immediately. Which is problem 1. They have a ton of expendable characters in this comic that are just like, are made to be killed. And it's pretty obvious they're made to be killed. I can tell you who dies and who won't die in this comic every time a character is introduced. Or at least in this volume. So yeah, we start with 3 characters, and apparently, I guess they're FBI agents, but they just keep referring to each other as agents, and they're dressed like, they're in striped suits, and they're carrying around axes. I don't think that's what FBI agents do. Now, granted, this takes place in the 1920s, but I don't know, that is not like FBI gear, right? So they walk and they find like a moonshine place and then they get torn apart by a werewolf in a very not good sequence. And then the next character we meet, still not the protagonist, is a little girl, question mark, who I don't think has a name. Her entire character is reduced to waking up our protagonist. I guess his name is Perlo. I have the comic in front of me. I did not know that. Her character is entirely just waking up our protagonist and occasionally saying like a nasty thing. I don't know why things keep doing this. Kids being vulgar just for like being vulgar is such an overused thing. Something I talked about in my review of Camp. I mean, like, South Park did it. South Park does it with a different kind of tone, I suppose. And then the next character we meet, still not our protagonist, is the mob boss, who only really shows up for like a page or so, but he's the most developed character in this comic. And when I say most developed, I mean like he has a motive that he constantly works on, and he's very determined. So we have ambitious, and we have motivated. That's 2 character traits. That's more character traits than any other character in this comic has. And then we finally meet our protagonist, Perlo, I guess. Ugh, he's so cardboard. It's terrible. I could, like, literally, a potato has more character than this guy. The little, like, snakes they have coming out of the phone that say his boss is yelling at him, because apparently, the vast amount of text on the page wasn't enough to let me know that his boss is yelling at him, have more personality, just because, like, they're making an expression, which this guy doesn't. Which I get, they were going for, like, a noir kind of thing, and apparently the hard-boiled detective can't ever show emotion, otherwise he's no longer a man. But he's not a detective, first of all. And secondly, like, even in like, good noirs still have personality. You can make somebody that doesn't express themselves but still has personality. Now, it's harder than making somebody that does express themselves, because sometimes it does come off like this, like they're a piece of cardboard. But you can do it. And these people apparently are award-winning authors. They should be able to do that, but they can't, apparently. Here we are. He meets a kid that disappears after this page. That mistakes, when he says pasta, he thinks he's talking about a biscuit. Sorry if my talking has changed tone. My ears have not been working right since I got off an airplane. And they both just, like, suddenly stopped feeling good. And he insults, like, the concept of biscuits and gravy, which I don't understand. They have biscuits, like, his thing's like, I'm from the city. I don't like how these hicks work. But here's the thing, they have pasta and biscuits in cities. I've been to Atlanta. I've been to Portland, Maine. I've been to cities. I've been to Washington, D.C. They have biscuits and gravy there. It's not just, like, a country thing. Why is he so against biscuits and gravy? Now, it's probably because he thought he was ordering pasta and, like, tomato sauce, I guess. Ugh. Again, this takes place in the 1920s. Maybe they didn't have biscuits and gravy in the city in the 1920s. It hadn't been discovered yet. And, so this guy, in the middle of this bar, hits on this woman, and a scene that goes nowhere, does nothing. That's a thing throughout the comic. Interact with people, do nothing, build no character, do not do any kind of story building, don't move forward the plot. And here's the thing, editors are there for a reason. If it doesn't move the character, if it doesn't move the plot, if it doesn't world build, get rid of it. Don't keep it in there. Ugh. Alright, I'm sorry, I just went off on a rant there for a minute. Alright, let's move on, okay? So we have the, Moonshine Man. It's just what I'm gonna call this guy that's missing an eye, that owns the Moonshine, that, Perlo. I'm gonna call our protagonist, Noir. So, yeah, Mr. Moonshine is, like, talking to Noir and is saying, like, I ain't never gonna sell you my moonshine. But his kids, like, take aside Noir and it's like, hey, he might not sell you moonshine, but we sure will. And he's like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I mean, I did literally just see him, point me towards a bunch of dead feds, which I can only assume he killed. I should definitely, like, betray this guy, right? I mean, the worst that can happen if I don't is I just get, yelled at by my boss again. Ugh. I don't understand. Alright, so, as we go through this scene, there's something happens that I just don't really know. Like, there's a frame where they're holding, like, where Noir and Mr. Moonshine are holding a jar of moonshine. And then, like, after saying, like, no for, like, the 50th time, Mr. Moonshine walks away, and Noir is like, whatever. And, then there's, like, the next scene after that, where there's just somebody wandering in from the woods. He looks severely burned, ? It's kind of hard to tell. And then, like, he, like, collapses into this random woman's arms and goes, it hurts. And this woman's name is Tempest, from best I can tell. And she shushes him like a brother. This is one of the brothers, by the way, that'll try to sell the liquor, I'm pretty sure. And, so yeah, he comes in from the woods, and then nothing happens. That goes nowhere. We don't know why he's burned. We don't know why he's, like, half naked. We don't know why he was crawling in from the woods. And I have no idea who Tempest is. She ends up being a major character in the rest of this comic. I have no idea who she is, what her motivation is, why she is, what her personality's like. Her name is Tempest. At some point, she does the diddle-daddle with the, protagonist. And that's it. That's who her character is. I'm guessing she's a witch. The last character I'm going to talk about is Dahlia, who is the woman on the cover of the comic. Is not at all the main character. Barely really is a support character, but we do see her. She's basically just a reoccurring back character as far as the first volume goes. I assume she has a bigger role in the second one. And from what I can tell, she and Tempest are both witches? ? Because she has a dream, or this guy's sister talks to him. And, like, after she has a dream where the, Noir's sister talks to her, she goes up to Noir and tells him, like, hey, I talked to your sister in my dreamy dream, and then she starts crying and runs off and gives him a knife. What the knife is for, never explained. Why she was crying, never explained. What this dream was, not explained. This scene goes nowhere. This character goes nowhere. The plot goes nowhere. What is the plot? I couldn't tell you. Oh, I'm sorry. These characters are just so bad, and that's the last I'm going to talk about them. Let's look at the art direction. Now, when I opened this up, I thought maybe this was just made by two dudes. There's like an entire credits roll at the beginning of this comic, and one of those roles is art director, who is Drew Gill. Mr. Drew, or Mr. I forgot his last name already. I'm no longer on the page. The art direction in this comic is pretty bad. The color is good, as I said earlier. The framing is typically pretty good. The art style is lacking. And what I mean is that it looks like a realism study. It's not stylized. If you showed me this comic, I wouldn't be able to say like, oh yeah, that's a page from Moonshine. It'd be like, that's a page from probably, I don't know, somebody's sketchbook. It's not real enough to be realism, and it's not stylized enough to be a style. And the thing is because they're sticking so harsh to realism, the characters can't really have extreme expressions, which, if you watch animation, then you know that, like, typically for people to express themselves, because you can't see all the fine little facial details in animation, is that they move wildly. In comics, typically, to express themselves, because they can't move wildly as they do in animation, and they don't have it's really hard. It would cost a ton of money to have such a realistic face that you can see all the little nuances in their expression. They typically have exaggerated facial expressions. One thing I'll say is, like, if you've watched the show Invader Zim, Zim, like, moves wildly to tell you that he's high energy and angry 100% of the time. When you read the comic, because you can't see his his body movement, instead, like, his face, like, just distorts to tell you how he's feeling. And tell you, like, if he's high energy, if he's disgusted, if he's upset, stuff like that. So, this comic is too realistic. They have exaggerated faces. Sometimes they have, like, an exaggerated angle that just looks weird because it's realistic. And I don't know if you've ever, like... Imagine just, like, seeing a person from, like, these extreme angles in cartoons where, like, there's a camera, like, around their stomach level looking up at their face. Like, on a real person, that just looks bad. In cartoons, it looks great. It's really dramatic. But on a real person, it's just like, this doesn't look right. Because, like, I probably was not built to view humans from this angle. Unless you're really short. In which case, I apologize that that's your 90% of your interactions with people is looking up. Because it doesn't look great. I mean, at least they're decent at realism. I'll give them that. But not just the characters. The characters look alike. They all look terribly alike. At least the white ones do. There are scenes where I can't tell if I'm looking at the protagonist or not. I can't tell you the protagonist's hair color because it changes. I can't tell him apart from his buddies. I can't tell his buddies apart. Like, sometimes there'll be a few characters that are just, like, so different from the others. Like, the two Tonys look vastly different from each other. I couldn't mistake them for each other. But, I think there's another bigger character that I, mistook for, Fat Tony a few times. But here's the thing. I don't know. It could be the same character. I have no idea because they all look so alike. And part of that's because of the lack of style. And part of that is just... they made them all look really generic. Here's a tip. Mess up your character's face a little. It makes it so much more interesting. Gosh. My computer just made a noise, and I know that got in the podcast, and I'm sorry. But give your characters exaggerated stuff. Like, I'm pretty sure that... I'm not sure if the depictions of, like, the black people in this comic are racist or not. But, hopefully not, because these are actually the best designed characters. I can tell them apart from each other. Like, oh yeah, like, that kid's not that kid. I can tell all the kids apart. I can tell all the adults apart. I can tell all the ladies apart. Nobody looks alike in this community. But they're not the main characters. He stumbles on, like, a group of, like, black characters at once. And then one of them goes, like, hunting through a swamp. Or three of them, actually. And, they find, like, a dead body. And, that's it. Other than Dahlia, you don't see these characters again, even though they're the best designed ones. Although, I mean, when I say best, I mean I can tell them apart. I'm pretty sure that this is a not okay thing. I'm not 100% sure. I am white. But like, most of these characters look fine, but there's a couple that are like, ooh, it looks like I'm looking at a postcard from 1920, which I guess is appropriate because this takes place in 1920. Gosh, I don't know what else to say about the art style. The werewolf, there's a deer in here that looks great, by the way. Props to the deer that shows up for one frame and looks great. The werewolf has a lot of really awkward poses. I'm guessing like they don't draw werewolves that often. And they also seem to change size on occasion. And body proportions. Although like it does, other than like the raptor feet, well I guess not raptor, it's like they have like a bird foot, the werewolf does. Or werewolves. I honestly cannot tell you how many werewolves there are. I think there's 2. They look alike, if there's multiple. And one thing that really bothers me, and that in the silhouetted shots, it has like a different face in the face, like, yeah, there's 2. So yeah, there's one that looks a little different than the other one. There might be a third one, I don't know. But there's at least one werewolf in here, where the face, you know those rip-off Chuck E. Cheese's where they have like these absolutely terrifying looking animatronics? The face looks like an animatronic from one of those. So you have like bird feet and animatronic face on these werewolves. There's like one frame of a great werewolf, and I'm flipping through right now and I can't find it. If I can, I'll scan it in and put it on the computer. But like the rest of the shots of the werewolves look pretty bad. And not just the werewolves. All of the action scenes, there's no movement in these frames. Like, it feels like these people have never written movement in their life. Not just, they can't do character movement, they can't do plot movement, and apparently they can't do visual movement either. Just, this is the most stale comic I've ever read. Like, there's action scenes where, like, a werewolf mauls, like, 20 people. And, I think Noir is a werewolf. I can't tell you for sure. Because they don't have any transformation scenes. It's like human, like naked human, werewolf, and then naked human. And sometimes it's a different naked human. I think that one guy that had burns, like, maybe those weren't burns, maybe they were, like, I don't know, veins or whatever. I think he's a werewolf. And I think Noir is a werewolf. There might be more. I don't know. I can't tell werewolves apart. And, for a while I actually thought Noir was the only werewolf. But, just like, there's so little movement frame to frame. And, like, they're awkwardly shot, like you only get, like, half a face. Alright, here's the thing. I don't know if you guys have seen Alien vs. Predator, but you know in, like, those action scenes? Like, there's some shots that are beautiful, you can see everything. And, like, yeah, there's action going on. But, like, most of the shots in these action scenes in Alien vs. Predator, like, you can see, like, a shoulder. Or you can see half of Predator's face. Or, like, you can see, like, the knee of Alien, and that's, like, it. That's what the action scenes in this feel like. And even the scene where you can see, like, everything you kind of need to see, it's so stale. It looks like sketches from a sketchbook. Like, just somebody was trying out, like, cool poses. Or, like, they just wanted to draw gore, so they drew some gore in their sketchbook. And then somebody said, hey, let's color that in, put it in a comic. And, then they wrote the rest of the comic around, like, this one picture of a werewolf, like, with its teeth piercing through somebody's eyes. This is my favorite frame in the book, ironically. Because it's the, it's so stale. It's so, like, awkwardly stale, because it is, like, a gory, well, it should be a very gory picture. But it's surprisingly tame. It's actually one of the tamer, like, mauling frames. And on top of that, like, while he's got this dude's head in the mouth, by the way, this werewolf goes on to kill, like, 5 more people in the next 10 seconds. He's just, like, nonchalantly looking to the left. Or right, I'm sorry. I don't know my left from my right. So yeah, this werewolf's like, yeah, I got a dude in my mouth. Oh, there's another dude. Guess I'll put him in my mouth. Haha, anything could happen. And it's so silly looking, and I know it's not supposed to be silly. Because of the colors. The colors say, hey, this is a serious scene. And this werewolf's face like, I don't know what excited or high energy is. All I know is, or maybe, no, maybe the werewolf is hard-boiled. It can't show emotion either. here's something I want to just kind of get off my chest, I guess, about this comic. Whenever I'm watching an animation or reading a comic in which there are werewolves, not so much with live action werewolf stuff, my favorite thing is seeing the transformations. I love seeing how frame by frame or panel by panel, how artists handle a human transforming into a beast. And I'll tell you how this comic handles it. It doesn't. There's not a single partially transformed werewolf in this entire comic. And the thing is, like, it's a thriller. It should have it because it's one of the more grotesque things. For me, it's more unsettling than the gore scenes or the mauling scenes with werewolves. And it just completely doesn't. I'm guessing they couldn't find a way to do it, maybe? Or more likely this is just a first draft that they decided to color in and publish for whatever reason. There's so much you can do with a transformation scene. And it's so impactful. Especially if it's like something they're fighting. If I can find it, and I can't guarantee that I can find it, I have, I'll put up behind on the YouTube video a, what's it called, animatic I did of a werewolf transforming over the course of like several minutes. And there's a second character running from this guy, and the guy's kind of helpless, and the werewolf is helplessly following this human, partially transformed, and like as these couple minutes go by, he just like keeps getting further and further, but for like several minutes. He's an amalgamation. He is like neither in his werewolf form nor in his human form. He's fighting it, and he's just kind of like zombie-esque following this guy around. It takes him forever to actually completely turn. If I did put it up, I apologize for the low quality. It is an animatic. It was never meant to see the light of day. And I never finished the animation, by the way. Never will. One last thing I'll take a note about. Pacing. Pacing is bad. There's a beginning, I guess, sort of. You know what? The whole comic feels like a beginning. I just opened up to a bad page. The whole comic feels like a beginning. By the way, there's just like a random like scene where Tempest and the protagonist do the diddly daddle. I have no idea why. They have zero chemistry. Well, actually, I guess they have plenty of chemistry because they're both nothing. They have no character traits. Ugh, why? I mean, like, I get why like they would draw it, but keep it out of the final like draft. Oh, I just opened up to a very bad scene again, but that time just because the drawing was bad. But the pacing is bad. The whole thing feels like either a really bad beginning, right? No, I'd say like a mediocre leaning bad beginning or really bad middle. There is definitely no end. It just cuts off. I get that it's a multiple part installment, but you still have to have an ending. Even if it's a cliffhanger ending, you need to have an ending. And the pacing's bad because there is no pacing. There's nothing to pace. It's just conversation after conversation after confusing scene after confusing time jump. It's sometimes I don't even think it's fully chronological. I think there's a flashback scene in this, but I can't tell. It's poor. Do not recommend at all. But apparently, IGN recommends it. And, well, whoever Nerdist is. So, thanks for listening. This was possibly the first episode of TechHeart Book Eating Club. It was the first filmed, technically second filmed, but I never finished a review for the first one I filmed. So, thank you, and goodbye.